Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest is Dr. Karsten Wildberger, member of the Board of Management E.ON. He's responsible for sales and customer solutions in regional units, distributed generation, energy management, marketing, digital innovation and transformation, and information technology. Good afternoon, sir. Good to have you here. I would like to start with the moment where we are now with the process of the transformation in energy sector. This is very challenging moments during stages of the pandemic, and I would like to ask you how the recovering from the coronavirus pandemic will affect energy transformation in EU and the fight against the global warming. Are we in a moment that a little bit of optimism is something that we can have? What's your point of view where we are with this process?
Sure. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for having me. Look, I'm much more optimistic about the chances and the opportunities for addressing climate change in the energy sector coming out of Corona. And there are several reasons for that. The first one, I would say, is there is a growing commitment also on the political side to say this is now the time to join forces and put a very strong, ambitious recovery package together, the Green Deal. So 550 million euros specifically devoted to accelerate that energy transition. I think this is a fantastic stimulus package for the recovery, for the European Union, but also to drive the necessary energy transition change forward and take a leadership position. The second point that makes me very positive is, I think, a growing belief and understanding in society also how important this is. I think the pandemic has sharpened our views around issues like climate change. And there's a higher level, let's say, of consciousness. What can we contribute to protect life, to protect the planet? And thirdly, which I think is very crucial for the entire debate, the energy change does not hinder economic growth. I'd say it's just the opposite. It actually accelerates economic growth because this technology is required for future prosperity, and hence the technology is there. We just have to do it. So I think the key question is just how do we execute it? It's more now a question also for politics as well as businesses. How do we get the horsepower on the rubber on the road and really make it happen?
The energy transformation is accelerating rapidly in EU, but the pace of it, the pace of the decarbonization process is different in member states. Some member states are more advanced with it, but some are not. Like, for example, Poland, which has the highest share of coal in its energy mix. Do you think that this widening difference could endanger this process, like this difference between member states? Is it a threat, or we can somehow use it as the advantage in reaching the climate neutrality goal?
Well, in what you describe, I think lies a risk, and but I think this is not just a question that's related to the climate change and the energy transition. I think this is an inherent challenge in the European Union. And I would say the following: it is absolutely crucial that all member states join forces about the conviction. Let's really get the job done. And then we also have to acknowledge differences. I think this is not a contradiction, acknowledging differences, but at the same time having a willingness to go faster and go fast and decisively as a whole. That would also mean that some countries may be more advanced than others in their speed. But I think what must not happen is that it slows us down. And I think that will be the challenge for the future, how we overcome this. I think, but I think that has to be based on the common belief that addressing climate change will help every single country, every single economy, But the difference is, of course, the starting points are different, and hence the kind of medicine that we apply has to be also different. But we must not slow down in our ambition and our speed of execution.
I want to dive a little bit more in those divisions between member states, because there is, when we talk about the energy transformation, we cannot avoid the question about the technology and what will happen when we invest in different types of energy technology and its impact, its consequences for the economy and for the people. So do you think, because we are now facing tremendous increase of the CO2 prices, which makes the pace of transformation, of course, more rapid, but on the other hand, it put the question how to do it. Do you think that with the knowledge we have now, with the state of the market, basing on the renewables, is it enough? For example, with some role of gas in this transition period, or maybe there is some kind of possibility for nuclear renaissance, the nuclear technology in European energy mix. This is the question which we are also facing in Poland, but many member states are also thinking about this, thinking what will be the source of the energy which will help us to reach the climate neutrality.
Right. Well, it's a great question, and I think it goes also to the core of how we manage this transition effectively. I'm absolutely convinced, and I think all numbers and analyses confirm this that I'm aware of, is the first priority is to really build out and accelerate the build-up of renewables. Onshore wind, offshore wind, solar. And solar has huge potential also in terms of cost perspective. And we've made progress, but I think we're too slow in the build out. I think this is, for any country, is the right thing to do. Now, to the second question about nuclear, I'm personally convinced that we should and we can solve that question without nuclear. In Germany, as you know, we are phasing out nuclear completely end of 2022, and we're in the midst of that transition. Then the question is, what is replacing in the interim period? And I think natural gas and the decarbonization of gas will play a crucial role in all of that. If you look at very ambitious build-out scenarios for Europe in 2050, the continent or the European Union, we can actually base our energy system 2/3 based on all renewables that we produce locally within Europe. The rest will need some shape or form of imports. And that's why we also invest heavily into hydrogen or decarbonized the gas sector to see, is there a new economy with imports from other sun-rich countries like the Middle East or Australia? Is that a possible future? So I think what is important is, despite all different technologies we're discussing, this must not slow us down in our execution of the rollout of renewables.
The energy production in EU is getting more decentralized. This is a trend, this is happening now. It creates a lot of new possibilities for smaller entities, for startups to appear on the market, to start producing energy, but also for us, for the citizens, for prosumers. We are able to produce our electricity in our households, installing, for example, the photovoltaic panels on our rooftops. How this new reality, new decentralized reality of energy transformation in Europe will change the position of old guards, of old companies, incumbent utilities, which are facing great dilemma, where to go with my business. If I see, for example, that there is a growing number of very small producers, how it will transform my business model. So how these old companies will be transformed by this process, and what will be the role of them in the future, the market energy of the future?
Well, clearly every system change and every technology change that also sits behind that puts any industry, especially established industries, under pressure. And they have to find the right answers with regards to their business model. As a matter of fact, E.ON has the same challenge like any other energy company, and we found our answer to this challenge in the last 5 years. So we have not only spun off power generation, conventional power generation, we are focusing today based on this decentralized energy system model with being Europe's largest grid company, energy networks company, and focusing on what we call customer solutions. So working on the edge of the grid with customers and for customers in this decentralized world. I'd say every single company has to find their answer to those challenges. And when I look at this decentralized world, of course, going through your existing business model, it means quite some pain. But when you get it right, there's again opportunity at the end of the tunnel and some light at the end of the tunnel. What I mean by that is, let's take the grid or the distribution networks. In order to manage the new system with millions of decentralized intermittent assets, you have to invest heavily into the networks because they become more intelligent. We invest today more into software, data, into silicon than into copper, because the intelligence of those distribution networks is increasing every single month. So from a business perspective, this means a lot of growth opportunities. It also, of course, also costs money. If I think of customer solutions, let's take e-mobility. If in 10 years we have a market with millions, 100 million electric cars, vehicles in Europe, of course, they need green energy. This green energy will be distributed in a different way. There will be charging infrastructure. There will be new business models like roaming, managing fleets. This industry is not necessarily best known for developing, say, new business models and making money out of that. But the opportunities that we see are huge. And the last example I can give you is being serious about the energy transition. One of the most effective ways is to also address the heating sector. And when you talk about the heating sector, then I'm talking about, getting to cleaner heating solutions in cities, in communities. And that's, for instance, something we also do very successfully in Poland. And I think it's a wonderful market with lots of opportunities where we can replace coal-fired assets to gas-fired assets and make this work.
Sir, you talked about the grids, and I would like to focus a little bit more on this topic because it is extremely important. It's like a bottleneck of the energy transformation, the investments in grids. So do you think that what is more important now for the quality of our transformation, energy transformation in Europe? Should we focus more on the local grids, just to make, for example, a bigger possibility for the prosumers to be part of the energy system, to make this grid, make this network working better? Or should be there focus on the European level? I mean, the network to integrate as soon as possible, of course, European member states, some high voltage infrastructure, just to be sure that we can finish building of the European market. Both of these processes are really important for the transformation. Do you see that some of those two processes is more important now?
I think the things that we need to get right, and they have to work in parallel, is the build out of renewables, larger scale. For that, of course, you also need the transmission capacity. But at the same time, we see an acceleration of the decentralized local build-out. And that, of course, also requires very, very strong and heavy investment needs into the distribution networks. And I'd say the energy transition in the end will only work with super smart distribution networks that orchestrate this complex system. So I think this is an absolute necessity. And from our side, we see so many investment opportunities and necessities to make that future happen.
One question about the business responsibility for the energy transformation and the role of it, because the many energy companies in Europe have grown rich over years by from the exploration of the fossil fuels, by selling them, by producing electricity, heat from coal, from gas. Do you think that now they should bear the cost of closures of the mines, power plants, or it should be somehow mixed responsibility, because also states were owners of those companies, for example, in many cases. So do you see here like the solution to make this transformation more just from this business perspective?
Well, if you look at lots of the development from a market perspective, a lot of the older technologies will disappear because of market forces. And I think every investor who invests will base his or her decision on market economy decisions. So I think market forces can be a very good instrument to make this transition happen anyway. Now the question comes to, if you want to put a very hard stop in for, say, political, societal reasons. And I think then we have to be careful in the following sense, because now something very big is at stake. And what is at stake is credibility, reliability, and trust. So when an investor invests money, a lot of money, especially like in a fixed asset industry where you invest for 15, 20 years plus, then I think it is important that these investors have the confidence that the contracts once were signed are actually worth something. And I think if that transition or the investment doesn't work out for market reasons, that's a different story. But when it's really forced, I think each state needs to find the right way to, on the one hand, protect investment and still do the right things, say, what is needed for the time being. So I'm not a friend at all of the principle, let's just change it and you bear all the costs, because the damage goes much deeper. Future investments, people look for long-term stability, and that attracts capital, and we need all of that. And I think that has a lot to do with reputation. So I think I would say both principles, or the three principles basically, market forces, not just having a one-side burden on the industry, but also long-term stability and reliability are important factors to consider.
And looking at this situation from the other side, from the side of the customer and from the side of small people, because the inevitable part of the energy transformations is rising energy prices. It can make the risk of growing energy poverty the threat for whole process. And I want to ask you how business should address this topic. How, because it's the responsibility of the state to adjust social policy to the energy transformation, but we, for this next decades to come in Europe, will be facing this process accelerating very much. And there will be questions how members of the markets will participate in this, how to make this process more with human face, to make it more swift and not increase the risk of energy poverty.
Well, it's absolutely crucial that this energy transition does not increase any social divide. And we as companies take this very seriously, and politics needs to take that very seriously. What is important to notice, across Europe we have vastly different energy prices. Germany is actually the most expensive country when it comes to electricity prices. As a matter of fact, almost 60% of the electricity price are taxes and levies. So they are not inherent in the production or in the energy system. It's actually the construct, the tax system that has been built around it. I would even go that far that I say there is no natural law that says by making this energy transition work, electricity prices need in the long run be more expensive. Because if you think about renewables, once the investment is done, we actually produce energy from the sun and the wind at a marginally low cost. And some markets have established a principle where the form of electricity, i.e. green electricity, we actually burden even more. So we artificially increase the price. And I think this is not the right structure. That said, in the transition phase, there is, of course, a risk in terms of how you allocate the cost that is going in from the investment perspective to society, that prices are not equally distributed. And I think that's the moment when we have to think about different, better tools to also take the burden off the people who can't afford it. And my last comment, which is very important, is the big pillar of the energy transition has to be energy efficiency. So how can we save and how can we consume less by using more energy efficient technologies? And I wonder if we put enough emphasis on energy efficiency to also accelerate that. That said, we as companies are fully aware of the potential risk that this may put on social instability. But it's not inherent in the system. And I think if you just the example of taxes and levies, I think on that system we really need to work hard. And if necessary, also help and support vulnerable segments.
As the prosumers and citizens, we will be able to produce our own electricity now and also in the future, but also we will produce more data, which not always could makes things easier for us. It creates also a lot of threats, but this transformation is like one of the most important aspects of it will be the increased connectivity between the customers, producers, distributors, and all the segments of the energy markets. How to secure our privacy in this more interconnected world where the energy is flowing from every side, from us, from the energy producers, from traditional market companies, and this risk to share too much is getting higher. So what would be the answer to this threat? How to adjust to this situation?
So first of all, in order to make the new energy system work, it has to be intelligent, it has to use data for the steering of assets, connecting generation and demand side much better, smart meters and you name it. The second point, which is very important, we in Europe, we have one of the most protective, consumer protective data protection rules with the GDPR worldwide. This is largely a good thing. We have to be very careful when we talk about this. What kind of data are we talking about? Not every single piece of data is as critical as another piece of data. And trust me, I don't know any company in Europe that wouldn't take privacy of customers extremely seriously. This is, for us as a company, is the justification why we exist, that we look after data privacy and we want to protect customers. But there is a difference in my view, though. If I have a smart meter and that I open that data to the grid so that my electric car charges during the night when there's a lot of wind and green electrons going through the wires, and I can have a better tariff. This is different data than my birth date with my bank details, or, God beware, any information about my health status. So I think differentiating which data what we mean by data is very critical. And secondly, let's not ignore the fact that when you talk about smart meters, we also put into the technology a lot of security in. So even to hack a smart meter and read out when my car was charged, this is not that easy, and that's not trivial, and we need to take this seriously. But I think by having a too average general conversation about privacy without any differentiation makes it very hard and makes us too slow. So in summary, I'd say it's absolutely essential that privacy is protected, that data is secure. This has to be enforced by the law. It is a company obligation. It's also a customer obligation to make sure they understand that better, but that must not and doesn't need to stand in the way of applying technology better. And I think this is the point where I don't think we get it always right.
Thank you very much for this.
Thank you as well, and have a great conference.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye.